Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, we will be taking a look at parameters in deep dive. In deep dive in this particular lesson, I remember that we've talked about parameters in JavaScript and functions, and we've talked about how parameter works and how the functions declaration in JavaScript treats parameter. But in this particular video, we'll take a deep dive, like I said, and then talked about values of parameters in JavaScript. And EFCs, it allows function parameter to have default values. So what this is basically saying is that when you are working with parameters in your function declaration, JavaScript allow functions to have default value, which means that if no other value is passed to such function, when a function like that is being called, it will use the default values that has been given to the parameters during the process of function declaration. Now look at a sample example below. Function, the keyword, my function x and y equals to 10. Return x plus y, my function 5. So if you take a look at this example, you will see that the y as the second parameter already has a default value, which is given a value of 10, as you can see it, which allows us to pass just a single argument when trying to invoke that function. And so try to invoke this function, we just naturally use the default parameter and the default value given to that parameter, and then add it together with the other parameter that is defined in the function. So that is what this example is basically explaining. And if you take a look at these default parameters, if a function is called with missing arguments less than declare, the missing value are set to undefined. So this is simply saying that if you have a function like this, let me use an example. Let me pull up this, okay, and then get this out. So let's say I have something like this function, my function, and then I pass a parameter a, b, and c, and then return a plus b plus c. And then I come out here to invoke this function and pass this function like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, whatever. Now, let me assign this to another video so I can output it in the browser. Let value equals, and then let me output the value here. Now, if you take a look at this, you will see that what JavaScript is simply doing is that JavaScript is honoring just these very three arguments that matches the number of parameters that was passed in during this function listing. You can see that the 5 is ignored. So if we have more than, if you have 6, 7, 8, any other number, JavaScript will ignore the rest and will only honor these three arguments that matches the three parameters. So if I have, I can just simply add them in the parameter, and then you see those changes as I am doing them, and then I can then add them here to effect those changes, and you see that my value will equally change as well. I hope you can see that. So this part is saying that when a function is called with missing arguments less than declare, which means if you have less parameter and more argument, the missing value are set to undefined. So all those values that are not provided will be set to undefined by default by JavaScript. Sometimes this is acceptable, but sometimes it is better to assign a default value to the parameter. So sometimes this will work, but sometimes they say it is better to assign a default value to avoid inconsistency. So it is always recommended to assign a default value to it. So let's take a look at an example again. So I will do this for default value. So let me take this out and say, okay, my function is x and y equals to 10. And here, sorry, I missed a pair of brackets there. I can say, okay, return x plus y. And then let me now call my function here. And this time I'm just going to add a single value. And then let's see what I get. You can see that here I'm getting 20 as my output. And that is because JavaScript is adding the argument with the default value that I have given to my other parameter in my function declaration. You can see that y has a value of 10. So that is why I'm getting 20. But if I don't want to use that default parameter, I'll just pass another value for that default parameter and then it will change. You can see now that I changed to 9. It ignores the default parameter and uses the new parameter that I passed in. So another example is this that I can use to demonstrate this. So let's say I have a greet function that takes a name equals to what name do I want to do. So let's say my name. Yeah, I passed in this and then say return hello name and then this exclamation mark. Now, if I call this greet, let's take a look. Greet. If I call greet this way and say let value equals greet. Now, you can see this is hello to be, which is correct. Now, if I passed in another value for name, let's say Alice, you should see my name change as Alice. So, which means that JavaScript will honor the arguments, the new argument, and ignore the default value. Anytime there is a change in the argument that is different from the default value that you've already set in your code. So that is how default parameters work in JavaScript. And quickly before we go, let's take a look at something else called direct parameter. So direct parameter allow a function to treat an indefinite number of arguments as an array. So sometimes maybe you want to take user input or something and you are not sure of the exact number or the exact length of the parameters that might need to take in. You can use this rest parameter to treat it like an indefinite number of arguments, which means even if the number is not known at hand, you can always use this to receive the argument, the parameter, no matter how many it is. So look at an example here. So this is an example that sets a sum to 0 and then it's now iterate. That means it's loop using for loop over this particular argument, and then here is assigning the result. No, sorry, it's assigning the result of that function through function invocation to a variable in order to just get out the correct output, as you can see. So let me just use this as an example as well so that to better understand what you are working with in this very particular lesson that we are talking about. So let me just pull up my editor again so that I quickly take a look at it. So I'll do it this way. So function sum. So the way you use the spread, the rest operator is by passing 3 dots and then arguments. Then open curly braces as usual. Then let sum the starting point to my array, and I can do for let arg as arg sum plus equals arg. So I can return this, I can return sum eventually. So sorry, let arg of args. And then here I can try to call it and assign it to a variable, the value of that formula. So let x equals sum, which is the name of my which is the name of my function, as you can see here. So just pass random number, say 8, 9, 4, 3, 6, 8, 7, 9, 8. So all this squiggly line is coming as a result of mistakenly added dots instead of comma to the numbers. So that is what I'm trying to correct here. Now take a look at this. If I should output X, let's see what I will get as my answer. And definitely you should see 124, which means that JavaScript with this adds rest parameter, it will sum up all the numbers since that is what I am doing in this function by looping over it and it will give me the output. You can see that here, if I have hundreds or thousands of number, it will easily just process it, even though I do not know the number of parameters I'm going to have at hand before I declare this function. But this adds rest parameter allow me to be able to take an indefinite number, like as many as possible, as per arguments when trying to invoke this function. Thank you. This is how rest parameter works in JavaScript. So in the next lesson, I'll see you. Thank you.